Hi, today I'm here with Representative Matthew Wright, who served the 142nd Legislative District from Bucks County between the years 1991 and 2006. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you.
I wanted to begin by asking you about the influence of your family and your early life on your future career as a politician.
Well, I grew up in a political family. My father was a state representative before me. And I was 5 years old, I believe, when he first ran for office. I was 6 years old, I guess. 1965, he ran for state representative. He was a local township commissioner before that. And my family had moved from, he was from the New York City area. Went to college, met my wife, his wife at college. Got a job in Bucks County and moved to Bucks County. They started to have children. I was the last. I was the baby of the family. So most of my brothers and sisters were getting to be teenager age by the time I came around. And I can remember some of those old photos of him campaigning and bringing his family around. And those were the very first photos. I don't really remember anything specifically about that, but I did see the photos after the fact. But one of the things that, getting back to your question, was how did it motivate me to get involved in politics? Well, that was the days before representatives or senators had offices in their district. And so, therefore, my father worked as a state representative out of the House. And one of the rooms in the House was converted into an office. They didn't do quite as much constituent work as they do today, but nevertheless, we used to receive lots of telephone calls from people. Stuff would be delivered, people would stop by, want to visit, etc., and talk with them about problems and issues. And the vast majority of the time, this was really before answering machines. When the telephone rang, if no one picked it up, there was no answering machine, it just rang, and no one picked it up. So those were the days when, especially my father, sort of drilled into my mother and to the rest of my brothers and sisters that we were required, it was our duty to go pick up the phone. And when you pick up the phone, it would be some person at the other end, and they would be talking. They want to talk to my father. Well, I'm sorry, he's not here right now. Can I take your name and telephone number? Well, I want to leave a message. Okay, what is the message? And so they start going on and on and on, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and sometimes you get some people just like to talk, etc. And here I'm a young guy, a teenager, my brothers, my sisters, my mother on this end of the phone, and we're just trying to get out of the person, just your name and telephone number, maybe a one-sentence soundbite, and we'll pass it along. And then so we started to learn from an early age how to deal with the public, how to, then of course my father would ask the question, we'd leave a cryptic message. You know, Mrs. Jones had a problem with her driver's license. Well, of course my father would ask me 20 questions. Well, what was wrong with it? What was the problem? Did she say if she did this or did that? Well, I don't know. So as we were growing up, we almost became the free staff of the office, trying to understand the problem, get to the root of the problem, anticipate what my father's questions were going to be, and then, in fact, quite often, if it was in a rush and he wasn't around, we'd have to call if he was traveling in Harrisburg, we would have to call Harrisburg and maybe get him, maybe get the staff in Harrisburg, and we'd have to pass on the message and explain the message. And I think those early days of essentially running an office, running a constituent office out of the House, taught me very well. And on top of that, then when I became an adult, able to vote, then I, of course, became, quote, the committee person for the district. And most people who maybe will watch this know that committee people, regardless of party, every party has committee people. And volunteers are always getting hard and scarce to find. And as a child, when campaigns came along, and as growing up to a teenager, etc., our duty was to go pass out literature, go knock on doors, go work election days, go help my father to run for election. And then when the off years and other people were running, we were drafted to go help them, etc. And then I became a committee person. So most of those, it wasn't necessarily by choice. It was sort of forced onto me. But I relished in that, and then when I got out of high school, went to college, and had to pay for my own way to get through college, I went into get a management degree from college, and I think the customer service, the constituent service that I learned from growing up in the family, led me down the path into the business sector and going into customer service fields.
Well, did your other siblings decide to enter the political arena at all?
No, I think because there's a wide difference between my oldest brother and myself. I think first my oldest brother escaped before he was required to do the political duty. He was already a teenager at that point when my father first got involved, and I think he escaped it. Then my sister and my sister got involved a little bit. She was next in line, and she did get involved a little bit. And the next brother above me, I think he just totally ignored it and walked away. He didn't have any ambitions or any interest in it whatsoever. So my sister did a little bit of work, and when she moved out of the house, bought her own house, got married in the community, I think she became a committee person too, and she had to help out until she then moved sort of out of the area, and that sort of ended that. She had an interest in what was going on, but I think once moved away from the house, I think it sort of ended that. I only moved actually about 6 blocks away, so when I first bought my house, so I couldn't get I couldn't escape the influence of my father in helping the public.
Did you ever come to Harrisburg with your father?
Yes. When I was a child, I think quite often I was brought up especially on holidays or when school was out in the summertime and they were still working, or the various holiday periods, such as maybe school was on Monday or whatever, and we'd be up there. Of course, most sessions are Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in Harrisburg. A lot of the holidays were on Monday, and if they weren't the major holidays, then session would still be in. My father also, as he rose up through the ranks, he became committee chairpersons of a number of committees, and so therefore his roles expanded, not just what we call session, meaning when everybody comes to all the legislators come to Harrisburg to vote, but we have extensive committee structures, like any other group in the world has subgroups. And those subgroups called committees do a lion's share of the actual legwork and groundwork. And as he became committee chairs, he would have to come to Harrisburg just for the day, for many times, just to have meetings. And so therefore, quite often he brought me up with him. I had a lot of fun. Nowadays, the Capitol's were closed due to security reasons. But when I was a child, there wasn't even guards around. Every door in the building was open everywhere. I could wander all around and go to the museum and go down to the river, etc. Also, my dad's secretary had some boys that are roughly my age, and then sometimes they dropped me off at their house, etc. So it worked out very well. I did grow up in the Capitol building.
So you feel very comfortable here, I'm sure.
Oh yes, I was in this building. I'm very familiar with the building before I came here 16 years ago.
Could you describe your career and your experiences before coming to the House? You talked about being a committee man, but what about your other work experience?
Sure. I never had any political experience. I was a committee man. That is political experience. But I never held a public office per se prior to this. And my direction was in business. Out of high school, I had my part-time job going through high school, and which was actually working for a local market. And it was actually, looking back, it was the job that I loved the most in life, but it was a teenage job and working with other teenagers my age, etc. You could never live on that job, but it was at that time period, it was probably the most fun I ever had in a job, because you have responsibilities, but you really didn't care about the responsibilities. You didn't understand how important they were. And I always loved that job. It was a local, for anybody who ever views this from Bucks County, it was with a local farmer called Steyer's. It was Steyer's Orchards, which still to this day is a very huge business in our area. Employed thousands of teenagers over the years. But that was how they both, they needed, in season, they needed a lot of teenagers. And as I had to pay for my own way to college, I couldn't afford to go to college full-time because I couldn't afford to pay for college full-time. So I had to go part-time at nighttime, and that afforded me to work during the day as a full-time employee. And then I was a manager there, and in today's standards, not much of a job, but it was the job that I remember the most. And I had the most fun until that put me through college. I paid my way through college, and then I got married, and then we started to have kids, and I built my first house, etc. But I got my business degree from Trenton State College, which is now the College of New Jersey, changed its names. And that was a commuting school. I could 25 minutes from my house, across in New Jersey. Bucks County is, for those who are not familiar, Bucks County is in the most eastern edge of Pennsylvania, down the southeast. It's suburban county of Philadelphia. And 95 runs right through the district, so I can get on the expressway, and in 25 minutes I could be out of my house and over into the college. So that worked very well, and had a very good night school. And I got a business degree in management from there, and then I used that. I bought, my wife and I was married at that point now, and we bought our first business, and it was a wholesaling business. We actually ran out of New Jersey. We bought someone out and took over their business and the routes, and we did that for about 3 years, I guess it was. But life was very difficult. We're having kids now, and it was a mom and pop type of a business, a couple employees. My wife had to work full time because we couldn't afford to add another employee on and still make a profit. So we made some decisions at some point that something had to change. It was a 7-day-a-week job. We both had to work. It was hard to raise a family. If we wanted to make any money, she had to work full time 6 or 7 days a week. Raising kids made it very difficult. So we made a decision to sell the business. Then I entered into the grocery store business. And at this time, Giant Foods is a large grocery store chain in the area. And I became a manager for the Giant Foods. And over a number of years, I was moved around to various different stores in the Bucks County area. And I was on a career path essentially there. I was a store manager. So many years, I'd be able to move up into the corporate management, which would be like district management, et cetera, and move on. So I was on a career path to be trained and to move up into higher management. But then my father, who was still a legislator, contracted cancer. And for about a 5-year period, he had it. And he had it, and he got better. He was in remission. Then he got it again to get better in remission. And then then how I got into this position is he was running for re-election in 1990. And in the middle of the cycle, he won his primary election in the springtime and getting set to run for the general election in the fall. And he had came down with the cancer risen again and got very bad. And in fact, he would not live and survive to finish out the term even, let alone run for the election. So he withdrew as a candidate. He was still the state representative, but withdrew as a candidate in August. That was pretty close to the last day he was allowed to withdraw. And that allowed the political party, to find a replacement candidate. Interesting, there was a lot of people that wanted it. But at that particular time, with, well, 2 to 3 months, essentially, before the election, a Democrat candidate, I'm a Republican, Democrat candidate was a local county commissioner, had come from the community I live in, had from the lowest level elected position worked her way up, and was a very strong candidate. And pretty much everybody believed that they needed a strong candidate to replace my father, or else the race would be lost. So after many people sort of vied to try to get it, the county political Republican Party got together and tried to find the replacement candidate. I did not want to run. I did not want to run. My father asked me once, and I said, I don't think so. Because I'll be honest with you, my father went through a divorce. Political life is very hard in the family. It is very hard in the family. You're away all the time. A lot of stress strains every weekend, every night. If you're going to get into a high elected office, every weekend and every night, every holiday, you are required essentially to be somewhere in the community doing presentations and community events. And then you have the job part of it, which is during the day. So it is an 80-hour-a-week job without any doubt. The stress on the family caused my mother and my father to get divorced. So I was trying to avoid those same types of stresses upon my family. And I did not want, and then the party chairman asked me, and then my father asked me, et cetera. And I kept saying no. Finally, they asked my wife. And my wife didn't really want to. And I said, well, only if my wife agrees, my wife Donna. Only if she agrees, because I didn't want to see what happened in my parents' lives to occur in ours. And she finally said yes. So then I became a replacement candidate. and with 2.5 months before the election, and they get out and go knock on a lot of doors and go talk to a lot of people. And the reason why I was asked, for obvious reasons, I'm never ashamed to say this, my father was well-liked. Jim Wright was well-liked in the community. And a lot of people, and they recognized the name, familiar with the name. A lot of people liked him, so there was a lot of the benefit of the doubt. A lot of times you go to elections, and it's Smith versus Jones. You don't know who Smith is. You don't know who Jones is. You don't know anything about it. You kind of just maybe fall back to the party, whatever party registration you are, and just hope that the party made a good decision in picking candidate. But in my particular case, a lot of people have been loyal to my father, regardless of their political affiliation, and had made decisions that, you know, Matt, if you're anything like your dad, or your dad did a good job, you're worth a try, etc. But of course, there was always that little threat that, you know, if you don't do well in the first 2 years, then you're out. So, and I did squeak by, and I was worked very hard in those couple months. I did squeak by, and then it was my job then to prove to everybody that I'm qualified and I could handle the job, and I'm worthy of being reelected the second time.
Well, how did you balance family and career?
Well, I don't think I did a very good job, because the same problems that occurred in my father's life causes occurred in mine. As I said, to do the job right, to really do the job right, you have to be very active, of course, in your legislative duties, which are Harrisburg, essentially, coming up the session, traveling at least 3 days a week, maybe 4 days a week for about half of the weeks a year out of the house, overnight in hotels, etc. up here. And when committees are called, committee meetings, and sometimes, you know, they're just day trips. Sometimes it's a 2-hour meeting and it's in Harrisburg, and you drive out in the morning, you do your meeting, do some other work, and you come home. Or maybe it's Allentown or it's in Philly, but sometimes they're in Pittsburgh or Erie or some other part of the state, and you have to travel overnight just to get to a 2-hour meeting. Now, it's a personal responsibility. Do you skip the meeting? You say, oh, I'm not driving, I'm not going to be away for 2 days to go to a 2-hour, 3-hour committee meeting. And some members don't do that. And sometimes you have local stuff, you know, you have to balance, you just can't do it anyway. But if you're going to do your job right, you make that effort. That's the legislative part. You have the community part. The community part is attending all the community functions. We represent multiple communities. They all have the local government functions. They have all the holiday functions. Plus, then you're invited to all the Boy Scout groups. You're invited to the athletic groups. You're invited to the social causes that might be in communities, the ribbon cuttings, the presentations, the dinners. You know, when the Lions have their meetings, when the Rotary has their meetings, etc. Yeah, you can't go to everything anyway, but you try to do your best. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one is it's just the right thing to do. It's part of the responsibilities of the job. Now, you can't be expected to go to everything. The other thing is unfortunately, we are a product of people's viewpoints and opinions of us. And you want to foster good opinions. And by doing that, you want to interact with people. You want to be there. You want to be there for them in their need when a local community is having a celebration event of whatever it is. They like to have the public officials come. They like to see the federal and state officials show up and to be part of it. And in return, of course, you're developing relationships. That those relationships come the next election. Or people say, oh, yeah, Matt always comes to these things. You know, I've met Matt personally a number of times at community events, and he seems like a nice guy, and you know, et cetera. And then, of course, that fosters positive votes for you to stay elected next time. So it's and then coupled, so you weigh an awful lot of weekends and nights to the community functions, because community functions are basically non-work weeks. They're working hours. They're typically on weekends and at nighttime. And then the third component of the job, of course, is constituent work, creating a local office, training employees, being available. As people come in the office, as they call the office, of course, when someone calls the office with a problem, they want to talk to the legislator. You know, of course, you have staff, and quite often your staff is better at actually helping to correct problems than I am, because that's what their job is. They're trained to do, you know, specifically, I'm trained a more broader range of issues. But people who call or stop by, of course, want to talk to the legislator. You can't be there every minute, so therefore, they can't always visit you, but you want to make their experience positive. want to help them out. Even if you sit down with them, you talk about the problem, you understand it, and either I work on it myself, or I say, you know, I'm going to have my assistant here. I'm going to work with my assistant. I'm going to direct my assistant to help you to try to overcome it, and I'm going to oversee that. I'm going to make sure that every stone is turned over to make sure that we have helped you with your concerns or problems. And they're very gratified. Now, there's a couple things with that. First of all, the public elected me, so therefore they want to interact with me. They believe in many cases that I'm the most qualified person to help resolve their problem and issue, which sometimes is true, but sometimes actually it's not true. Because sometimes, as I said, my staff is more knowledgeable about some of the things than I am, but it's just the nature of what the job is. And people just want to feel that they can reach out and they can communicate. They call me at home. They call me, of course, now today we have cell phones and emails and all those kinds of things. But it used to be telephone. When I first got started, telephone was pretty much the main way, and letters and whatnot, and walking into the office, setting up meetings, etc. And they wanted to meet with me, and that's the right thing to do, but you can't always be available. But if you're going to do all three of those, the legislative, community, and constituent work, if you're going to do it right, or you're going to attempt to do it right, and then you are essentially committing yourself to 80 or 90 hours a week, pretty much most of the weeks a year. I rarely have a day off, even on a weekend. There's rarely a day, on even a weekend or a night, that I literally have nothing to do. I almost always have to specifically block out time. Now, depends how far you want to reach to find something. There's always, all the churches are doing something. You have 30 or 40 different churches in my communities. All of them are doing 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year something on a weekend, whatever that is. And they're all doing it at different times, whether they're holding special services or their anniversary events, or they're having fundraising or whatever. So just by doing the churches alone, and all the community groups and the athletic groups and whatnot, it's just a very time consuming. Bring it back to what your question was, how did I balance that? As we had little kids, my wife essentially spent most of her time with the kids, so it didn't really create so much of a problem. As the kids became teenagers, though, teenagers didn't want to spend as much time with mom as they used to, so that's when then she went back to work, and that was fine. But at somewhere along the line, actually, her business that she was with closed up. And then she was trying to juggle in her mind. She to go look for another job. But at that particular point, I think that we made a decision that she wasn't going to immediately go back to work. And that's when we started to spend a little more time together. She travels with me a lot. She goes to the community functions. I would go to all these dinners, especially in the evenings for the community groups. And through all my early years, I went alone. It was just me. I went, and I would talk to people and meet people, etc. But now in the latter years of my career, when the kids are now teenagers and they didn't have to be babysat, they didn't have to be watched, they didn't have to be home, etc. It allowed her to either put more time into a career, but we decided that she would spend time more with me to try to bolster relationship with me, to avoid some of the pitfalls that many of the elected officials have, or executives in business, or people that are in a business that are working so many hours. So, and I do praise her for that, because while not having the second income in the family has hurt a little bit, on the other hand, it's been able to allow her, when I go to Pittsburgh for a meeting, she'd go with me. And so driving out on the car, the 5.5-hour drive to Pittsburgh, she'd be in the car with me. We'd do my meetings, and afterwards we'd have dinner together, etc. Maybe of course, if we're going to Pittsburgh, we'd stay overnight. So it allows them to drive back. So it's not those hours being separated. At least we're together. Now, it's talking about business, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Whenever you were small, you watched your father. You had small children who've watched you as a state representative. Do you see any interest in what you've done in them?
I have two daughters, Jennifer and Christine. I do not see any interest whatsoever. I think probably because when I was a child, as being a boy, besides, well, first of all, we had the office in the house. Now, as I'm a legislator, we do not have an office in the house. So therefore, my family is not required to go talk to everybody and pick up the phone. My kids really didn't have that much interaction with that. Second of all, as a boy, I was also required to do labor of, in election times, you know, go hand out literature, go up and walk up and down the streets and pass out stuff, where, I'll be honest with you, I don't think girls were so much pushed in that field as the boys were. And so therefore, that's another reason why maybe I got pushed into it more than, let's say, my sister did. Both of my daughters are now out of the house. They've actually finished school and they're out of the house. And they actually both live now in the communities where the colleges they went to. They settled there when they were going to college, and then they got jobs in those areas. So, and they don't live around here. So I think that's the third strike that sort of put them away. One has an interest in issues, but I don't think she ever has any desire whatsoever to get into politics per se.
Okay. I was wondering if you could describe maybe some of your subsequent campaigns. We talked a little bit about your first campaign. Could you talk a little bit about your others?
Sure. My very first campaign, I'll just go back and reiterate about that. That essentially was a very difficult race. I was a replacement candidate at the very last second. And the sheer factors involved there made it a very close, very competitive. And I will be honest, essentially the powers that be that were going to help me and assist me to run for election, whether they're from my local community, the county Republican Party in Harrisburg here, because it was such a short time frame, they said, Matt, you just go out and interact with people. Go knock doors, attend all the functions, meet people, interact with people. Just do that. Other people behind the scenes will do all the strategy, the fundraising, all those mechanical parts that have to be done. And so I was not even really too involved with issue development per se, with how to raise the money, meeting the people that would contribute funds, all those kinds of things. So that first election, while it was difficult, believe it or not, my part of that was not as hard. Mine was just get up early in the morning, find a way to go meet people. Whether it's go to a train station, you know, early in the morning, go wherever the people are. If there's a community event, go to the people. If there's no community events, things like that, go knock on doors. If it's after dark, go to a grocery store and go talk to people at the grocery store. That's what I did, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for two full months at least. Okay, now that I won the first one by a very small amount, then essentially running for re-election was now my responsibility. To some extent, you know, I would have help, of course, but the first one, other people were sort of in charge of that. So my re-election, the burden was on me to put it together. And even though I had run through and I had already won one election, I was still learning some of the trade a little bit for the first time, because I didn't have to do that myself the first time. In this particular race, the second time around, I had to learn those things. Put the volunteers, coordinate volunteers, strategy, issues, all those kinds of things, raising money, but you have to balance all those kinds of things. It's a horrible part of running for office, but you have to raise money because you use those money that you raise to pay for your signs, to pay for your literature, to pay for your mailings, etc. If you don't raise money, then you don't have signs, you don't have mailings, you don't have literature. And without that, you can't communicate a message. So my second time around was a difficult race too. Local Democrat Party said Matt shouldn't have won the first one. And so there was a whole huge effort to beat me in that second one. It was, I won by more votes, but it was still a very difficult race. Then after I won the second one, I've been in office for 8 terms. Then they all got relatively easy. When I say relative, they were all fights. But the amount of effort had to go into it. I started to gain support from Democrat voters, local people. My opponents couldn't get the traction that they were hoping to get, and then they couldn't raise the money that they wanted to get to communicate their message, etc. So my re-elections were easier. And then we come up to this very last one, and I'm leaving office because I lost. This particular election had some factors in it that were in my control and were out of my control, and some of those, and the sum of those factors caused me to lose. And some of those factors were what started it, I believe, what started the downfall, which was not necessarily the biggest and only issue, but it was one of the many issues, was the legislature had gone through a period of years without getting a pay raise. And a year ago, the legislature decided that they were going to give a pay raise to the legislature, the governor, the administrative staff, the secretaries, the judges. There were about 4,400 state employees that were in this executive tier of sorts. And that, even though there have been, I think, 3 times prior, my 16 years of service, there have been 3 prior pay raise votes. They never really seemed to rustle a whole lot of negative outcry. There's always a little bit. Nobody likes other people to get raises. Everybody wants a raise, but nobody wants someone else to get a raise. You know, even people who live in all kinds of jobs, you know, you want a raise, but you don't want the colleague next door to get one, or you know, your counterpart or your neighbor to get a raise. You want to get the raise. And so this year was a little bit different. I think it was some of it was legitimate complaining. It was overblown, and I think one of the problems of it was a large pay raise because we hadn't got one in a long time, and it was sort of that catching up kind of a raise. When you get a raise every year, you get small ones. But if you get a raise for 10 years, and you want to get the same where you should be, then of course it's a big raise. And I used to be a grocery store manager. Let me give you the example. This is a very good example. As I said, I was a grocery store manager. We'll take a can of peas. The can of peas would come in, a case would come in, and just slightly more cost on that case. So the can of peas are on the shelf for 33 cents. You say, should we make it 34 cents? Nah, just let it go. Then 6 months go later, and the price increase comes across, and should be another penny a can. Maybe we should go up to 35 cents a can. No, let it go. And you absorb that a number of times in a row, and somewhere along the line it goes up again and again, and you say, you know what, we've got to change. We're going to raise it to 39 cents. You cannot believe it how many people came, why are you raising these peas from 33 cents to 39 cents? Well, if you would have done it every single time, a penny, 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 nobody ever would have complained. Nobody ever would have complained. And yet, the 33 to 39 would have been exactly the same over the same period of time. But it's the shock factor, essentially. So that was the very first thing. And that issue was very well used against me. The strategy used against me was very well done by my opponent, the political and the Democrat Party. But that didn't beat me. That was a factor, of course. What really beat me was in 2006, dissatisfaction at the national level with President Bush, mostly over the war in the Middle East and Iraq and Afghanistan. The heightened anger on a national level, and even all the way down to my community, rose up that the Democrat Party on a national level, right down to the local parties, was able to harness that negative energy to get a tremendous turnout of Democrat voters, far exceeding what the experts were predicting. And a lot of these people were not regular voters. And in my community, I think most everywhere, they were incited by the war and anti-Bush. And for instance, at my political polls, the mailers at the end and the polls, they were passing out the cards asking people to vote against George Bush. Well, George Bush wasn't on the ballot. But what they were doing is they were being told to vote against George Bush, you have to push the straight Democrat Party ticket, which is a good strategy from the Democrats' point of view. It is a very good strategy. So they were able to get a whole lot of, in my case, about 2,500 unexpected voters out that were not expected to be there. And generally speaking, we believe they voted straight Democrat Party, which means they were trying to send a message to Washington, which is what the national Democrat and local Democrat messages wanted to be. But on top of that is, by voting straight ticket, then they're voting against every regular Republican on the ballot, whether that person consciously were thinking of doing that or not. And in my community, essentially, Republicans got wiped out, including me. So we all lost elections. Every single one of all the incumbents, all the Republican incumbents in our area lost. So it was sort of that sweep at the state level, a little anger about the pay raise, but in reality, it was the deluge of the additional Democrat voters that were angry, vote straight ticket to show George Bush a message. And I'm not depressed about that because you can see in cycles in the past, national times, like every 10 years or so, 15 years, you see these similar kinds of trends where one party or the other gains or loses because of these big sweeps that go through. And in 2006, federal government all got changed. Most of the governors across the state went Democrats. So the question would be is what's going to happen in the next cycle? And I don't know what's going to happen in the next cycle. The Republicans came in 90, I think it was early 90s, I can't remember, when they had a major sweep. The voters, generally speaking, were upset with the Democrat Party at the time, kicked out the Democrat Party at national level and a lot of the state levels. A lot of Republicans came into control, and the Republicans had control for a decade, and then now, you can see the patterns. You can see these patterns in history, where it's roughly a decade. It's give or take a little bit. Every decade, one party shifts over to the other party for control, and this was the time, and I got swept out too.
You talked about fundraising and raising money. Do you remember how much it did cost in your first election?
Yes, mine was an expensive first election in comparison to other races, and if I remember correctly, direct raising money, and then you have sometimes things that are done by other groups that on behalf of candidates, and it's kind of hard to put a number on that. But we had predicted, I had raised about $50,000, which was considered to be on the high side in most elections. My opponent had raised about $100,000, which at that particular point one of the more expensive ones, and my opponent lost. At that particular time, 16 years ago, that was considered a lot of money. That was one of the high profile races that raised a lot of money. In today's times, in 2006, that's a drop in the bucket. My race, this particular time, was on the high side. Both my opponent and I we don't have final numbers. We're probably looking at $300,000 to $400,000 a person, a piece. So we're talking about $800,000, $700,000, $800,000 total raise, versus at best 150. So it really does make a difference. And in the years that I didn't have tough races, I would only spend legitimately on getting reelected items probably $15,000 or $20,000. 2 years ago when I ran, besides sponsoring, buying tickets to all the community events and sponsoring all the Little League teams and whatnot, if you separate that from actually paying money for mailers and signs, I only spent about $15,000 last time around, and probably $300,000 this time. So it is a major difference. And let me explain how that works. There's 203 House seats. Some are obviously going to be Democrat seats, no matter what you do, and some are obviously going to be Republican seats, no matter what you do. And then you have a block that's in the middle that kind of could go either way, but you have some people that are very strong in their districts, and so you don't even make an effort. The parties don't make an effort to go after them, or if you don't have the right candidate, opponent, etc. And it gets narrower and narrower. So then you get to really about, out of 203, you get down to about maybe 30 very competitive seats. And out of those 30 very competitive seats, for whatever the reasons are, then all the money from around the state tends to flow towards those races. Even people you don't even know contribute to you because they're loyal, diehard Democrat, Republicans, etc. And they've been told through the grapevine that where you live, that person really doesn't need your support. But if you want to help out, send a check to some of these other people. And that's essentially, when you get onto the top 30 kind of a race, what happens is then people don't even know you start contributing to you. They want to know you, they want to get to know you, but there's some reason for it, or they're just loyal to a particular party, and they were whispered that, why don't you contribute to so and so? He could use your support, she could use your support, etc. And a lot of times that's how a lot of those contributors also work too.
Could you tell me a little bit about your district?
Yes, I'm Bucks County, which is a suburban district of Philadelphia. My district is a blue-collar district. It's a working-class communities. Feasterville, Levittown, and Langhorne are the three main towns. It's a compact district, as opposed to in rural America. There are A whole county could be a district. Mine is essentially you could walk easily 80% of it. Most of them are clustered communities, developments, or old towns, etc. We are not the city, but we're right on the edge of the city. So you have a lot of as of today, you have some of those city problems that are beginning to encroach into the communities. And at the 16 years I've been in office, all the vacant land has either been purchased as open space to be preserved, or has been built into housing developments or commercial shopping centers, etc. So there was no large tract of land left in my whole legislative district at all to be built on, except for a couple farms that we were able to preserve, which I have assistance in getting money to help preserve those farms. And the local governments own them, and, for recreational use, etc., or park use. And including that one Steyer Orchards that I had mentioned. They were part of the family had given their total share of the value of the property, which they were getting very old, and they didn't need the money, over to the municipality to help make the deal work. So they were purchased. And, but it's a 50-50 district. It's pretty balanced. It's, generally speaking, it's probably slightly moderate to conservative in viewpoints. But the newcomers moving in, I have an awful lot of people, especially from Philadelphia, moving into my communities. People who lived their whole life in Philly, had a career there, etc., retire. When they retire, they moved out of the city. They moved up into suburban areas, whether it's Bucks County, Montgomery County, etc. And by doing so, I believe I've seen the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years a dramatic shift in some of these age-restricted communities that are being built. And the people that are moving into them do not have Bucks County roots. They've come from somewhere else. Those are the communities that tend to not be as familiar with local issues, local elected officials. They tend to not really be involved, but the kids didn't go to school here. They didn't run their kids through dance classes or athletics or those kinds of things. They're relatively new to the community. Discretionary income. Many of them have maybe a vacation house at the shore or something, so they're not even really 100% full-time residents. I've built up a good relationship with the old-timers, whether they're old in age or they're old families, that generations of the families, and I've done very well with those. And you can, through voting districts, you can see where I've been successful over the years and where I'm not successful. And all those new communities, especially the age-restricted communities, are the communities that tend to go pretty much along party registration. And because I don't have a good relationship with them, I do very well in Democrat communities, in the older communities, do very well in the older Republican communities. So it's the new people moving in, which are tend to be Democrat in my legislative district, and I hate to also say tend to be. I'm retired now, and I want my life as retired, and they don't necessarily want to support the schools. I've really noticed that generations after generations of families in the same general communities are very dedicated to the local schools in my communities. I've noticed these age-restricted communities that are coming in. They're essentially saying, "Hey, I paid my taxes in Philly or wherever it was, and I raised my kids there. I sent my kids there to school. Now I'm retired, and therefore, I'm moving into this community, and I don't see why I have to support the local schools." I'm getting that tremendously, and in the future, if you're looking back into this is the time period when the legislature is going through that, trying to find a way to reduce the reliance on property taxes to pay for schools, because these age-restricted communities are typically expensive houses. They're twins, they're quads, but they're very pricey, and because they're very pricey, of course, the property taxes for them. These retirement communities, there are many of them that are $500,000 homes, where my average home in my district is probably $200,000, $250,000. But these age-restricted communities, and they're not that big of houses, etc. But because it's new construction and people want the marble and the kitchens and the bathrooms, and they want the you know, et cetera. They want the best of things. And then, of course, it becomes an expensive house. Becomes an expensive house, then the property taxes are related to the value of the house. And so, as of the taping of this, where outside of those communities, the property taxes are maybe $3,000 to $5,000 a household. In those communities, they're $6,000 to $10,000 a household, and they're retired. And you can see why there's a revolt. Essentially, why am I paying $10,000 when I'm retired and don't have any kids in school anymore? Well, it's because it's the house that they had purchased, and that's what property taxes are. It's based on essentially the relationship of the value of the property that you had bought.
Can you talk a little bit about the projects in your district that you were able to help?
Yeah, I'm very. Most of them are the biggest issues are probably the two land deals that we were able to preserve, and one we were working on that didn't work out. But one was the Steyer Orchards, which I had mentioned earlier. It's an old family farm. People in the area all know it. It's still in business now, not as partly as a farm, but it had a big retail store attached to it, farm market attached to it, and so that most people know what it is, but it's still in existence. We were able to work. I had my working relationship with the family when growing up as a kid, and many years thereafter, and knowing the family and staying in touch with the family. The three-generation of them, the grandfather, the father, and the son. They all collectively, the grandfather, Pop Steyer, was 104 when he passed away. And he was around 100. That's when his son, which was about 7 years old, said, "I'm out of here. I'm retired. I want to retire." He'd already sort of retired and moved away, went to Florida. And then his son was managing, and his son really didn't have the heart in it, so they were essentially all one-third owners, the way that they had passed down ownership of the property. So the son and the grandson essentially wanted to get out, and that was 2/3. And the grandfather, we were able to structure a deal where he gave his value of the whole business, and the land, the business, gave his value free. He just kicked it in. We were able to get $1 million, and this was going back a few years now. So therefore, the value of the land is a lot more now than it was then. I was able to get $1 million plus some other kinds of grant monies to kick into the pot. The grandfather kicked in his share, and the two other parties, the son and the grandson, took less money, and therefore we were able to put the deal so the township was able to buy the property and preserve it. And then over in one of my other large communities, the Play-Wiki farm, which has roots going back to the Lenape Indians. There's a monument back there. There's recorded history of when they had an Indian tribe there at one time, a settlement, and then the various family farms who owned it kept track of that kind of stuff. So we were able to save that one. That was a little over $1 million for that one also, and they were able to cut some deals. Municipality kicked the money in, and we preserved that, and that's a great park now. It's not a farm anymore at all, but that's a great community park. The other thing was the Lower Southampton Library. They were in a very small building, in the township building, and they had their dreams to break out in the new expanded building, state of the art. And I was able to get about $1.5 million to make that deal work. And without that money, the township would never have been able to. They would have had maybe eventually get out, but it would have been much smaller, scaled back. And this allowed to be at the time that it was built a couple years ago, the state of the art, the newest library in the area. All the other libraries were envious of the new building. No, but of course the next newest one will be bigger and better. But and then last thing, St. Mary's Medical Center is in my district, and I've been able to bring lots of state grant funds to assist in expansions. They have, in my time of in office, they've growing dramatically. They've probably expanded double what they were when I first got into office, and not all, but a chunk of that was through state funding. They probably wouldn't be able to continue the expansion without the state funding, but they would have had to go find more money. They would have delayed, et cetera. And we have St. Mary's is a state-of-the-art center. It's a medical center. It rivals the Philadelphia firms, and it helps so many people. It's a big employer. It's the largest private employer in Bucks County, and I'm very proud of that. Those are the big institutional ones, but I have helped so many small groups with smaller grants, from all the little community groups, local little parks, stormwater management, the municipalities. A big grant that really hasn't got any attention was I got $13 million for the school district to renovate their high school and expand it. It was probably the largest ticket item that I've ever got, but didn't garnish really any attention because it went to a taxing body, a school district. You know, when they're building a $70 million building, that was just a small amount. But that was probably my largest amount that I got for any other group. But I'm more proud of really a lot of the small groups that I helped get into existence, from the senior citizen centers, getting them regular money so they can continue to buy equipment, to continue to buy new rugs and paint the building, fix things, air conditioning units. Otherwise, I don't think the centers would be able to generate enough revenue to do it all on their own, and I'm very, very pleased with those items.
Can you tell me how you felt whenever you were sworn in as a member for the first time?
Well, I'm very proud to be a member. I was astounded by and in awe of, especially the very first day on the House floor. The day that it's a ceremonial day, you don't really do anything. All the members come, all the guests and families, every possible seat, folding chairs in every possible niche that there is on the floor to cram as many bodies into that floor as you possibly can. With flowers on the desks, you know, everybody sends you flowers, and you have little square areas, many flower vases you can fit onto that. And then all your family's there and your friends and supporters, the people that came and helped you out. I was just in awe, even though I'd been in the building so many times before that. I was actually a guest page many times. In the front of the House, there are errand people. A page is a glorified term for errand person, running errands. As the legislators are doing work, you know, you need copies of stuff, you need this, you need that. Go deliver this to there. All those, just little errands. That's exactly what it is. They have a couple employees, but they also have what they call guest pages. And I was a guest page many times as a child. And you know, and of course I got to know where most everything was in the building, and so somebody would give me a package, say, deliver this envelope over to such an office, or, you know, I need copies of this, etc. And I do that. So I'd been in the building so many times before that, but that very first day you get sworn in, you really get choked up. It really gets choked up, and it really hits home that the decisions that you're going to be making in the next 2 years are going to could have lasting, lifetime effects on millions of Pennsylvanians. And you don't really understand that until you actually get in the building and you're with everybody else and you stand up and you swear that you will uphold and support everybody in the Commonwealth.
Well, the first day is ceremonial. After that, you hit the ground running.
Yes.
Can you talk about?
Sure. I've obviously had a little experience, but more than some others. But others had been in local government, so they've been through the process at a smaller scale, of course. Or some people maybe were government staffers, maybe for the House or the Senate or et cetera, the governor's office. So they've already had some experience. I think there's a couple issues there's a couple things you have to master. You have to understand the issues, and we deal with such a diversity of issues, from inner city problems to rural, to mining and hunting, and inner city is you got blight, and you got housing issues, you got economic development, you got all kinds of issues, and suburbia is different than all the rest. And so you got to be a farmer, you got to be a miner, you got to be a hunter, you got to be inner city economic development, blight, you know, law enforcement. Law enforcement in the city is different than law enforcement out in the woods. So you have to understand issues, and nobody knows all the issues, and you have to be able to, besides understanding them to some extent, you can't be an expert on everything, understanding how to get the information that's needed to make rational decisions, and also who to listen to, who not to listen to, because well, everybody's biased. Of course, every group in the world is biased in a particular direction. You have to be able to cut through the bias, you have to be able to cut through the rhetoric, and to find out what the actual facts are. And then you have to by doing that, then you have to forge a relationship with leadership, other members, other political parties, senators, the Senate, etc., staff, the governor's staff. You have to forge those relationships to be able to come and negotiate with them to achieve some sort of goal. And of course, you have to have goals in mind. Sometimes you have goals when you come in, and sometimes some of the things that you do are not your initiatives originally. There may be a constituent brought a problem in, and you realize, that doesn't seem right. I mean, you had no idea about that ahead of time, and that doesn't seem right. And you say, I think we should work. I should work on that and try to make that correction. So I think probably the biggest thing is learning, and I try to advise freshmen or candidates running for office that you should have that that drive to change the world, to make things happen, to change the world. But you're not alone. You have to work in a system, and I think the people that are most successful are those that can work with others, and those that can develop relationships and to negotiate and to give and take. If you're 100% I want, you're not going to survive, because so many other people here want also that are not the same as your wants. And if you're going to be butting heads with them, you have to learn. You have to pick your battles. You got to give sometimes when you don't want to give, but you got to give, because that is the nature of what the job is.
Were there any members that showed you the ropes or mentored you whenever you first came to Harrisburg?
Well, a couple different aspects. I learned under Matt Ryan, who was Majority Leader at the time and then became Speaker of the House. I learned from him, not necessarily took me by the arm and walked me around and showed me the ropes, but I learned through him by example of how to negotiate, how to stand firm on the issues that you really believe on, to be able to give and take, and to be and don't get into the gutter in terms of debate the issue, don't debate the rhetoric. And from he was a true statesman, and he taught me through by example of how to be honorable in your job. John Prezell, who was in various leadership positions and is now the Speaker of the House, he probably in the beginning had the most hands-on with me, teaching me the ropes, how the system works, and getting me up and going, getting me to understand also the political side of the job, because that is. Unfortunately, we do live in a world where you have to get people to like us, and because you need to be reelected next time. It doesn't matter what you do in a 2-year period. If nobody likes you at the end of the 2-year period, you're not coming back. And it's very difficult to get things done in 1 2-year period. It's multiple terms. And so therefore, there's a need to continue on for multiple terms. John Prezell taught me how to be able to don't step into landmines, be careful what you say, those kinds of issues to keep me out of trouble, essentially. And a lot of people, he's from Philadelphia. It takes a lot of criticism, but I have learned to meet him personally and know him personally over the years. And he really does seem to care about everybody from rural America and Democrat, from rural PA all the way to the inner city. Even though everybody says, oh, he's from Philly, he only cares about Philadelphia. That's not true. He does care about everybody, and he helps Democrats, he helps Republicans. He's very, very, very fair. And then probably at the local level, I sit on the floor. We have desks, and our desks are joined together. There are rows of desks. There are banks of desks. And from the very first day, I sat down next to Paul Clymer. Paul Clymer is a fellow Bucks County legislator, representative from Upper Bucks County. A true gentleman. He has his convictions, it sticks to him, but is fair. And he has taught me the more nitty-gritty ropes, taught me more about the various angles of issues. You have your own perspective when you come in of some issue, and he's been able to teach me that you have to look at it different perspectives. There are two sides to every story. There's two sides of every issue. It's not black and white. It's not right or wrong. There's shades of gray, and I admire Paul Clymer, a statesman who came before me, and he's still here now. very well liked by everybody. I don't always share his opinion on every issue, but a true gentleman, and I think he taught me the most about how to do the job.
After all your years of experience,
yes,
have you had the opportunity to mentor anyone?
I think the individuals coming into Bucks County, not so much across the aisle or other communities, but in Bucks County, I quite often helped. I was very strong in reaching out to the constituents, communicating. I was very strong with services to the public through my office. That's where my strength was. And my strength was also very strong in understanding the issues. I was not necessarily a big playmaker in Harrisburg, but I was commended many times for understanding the issues, having a well-broadened understanding of the issues, the grayness of all the issues. And also, I learned from the beginning, if you can't throw rocks in a glass house. When I first got there, like many freshmen, you start to throw rocks, and you soon realize you're throwing it in a glass house. What comes around goes around. So, and I was able to teach that to most of the predecessors from Bucks County that came in who took over other seats, of members who left after I got there, who have left, and new people have taken their seat. I was able to spend time and I think teach them about the nuts and bolts of the job. Back in the district, the importance of, Harrisburg's only half the job. The other half is back in the district. And we've had some legislators come to Harrisburg and do nothing but Harrisburg, forgot where they came from, and then lost their next election because they never interacted with the public, and the public felt slighted. So whether it should or should not be, it is a two-edged sword. You have to be back in the community just as much as you're in Harrisburg.
Well, do you have any examples of how you were able to work with both Democrats and Republicans to maybe bring an issue to light?
Absolutely. They're probably mostly through committee structure. I mentioned earlier we're all assigned committees, like every group in the world. The real nuts and bolts of running the House and Senate is through committee structures. And committee structures, this particular year, I believe we have 25 standing committees. And committees are to take in all the areas of the issues: education, consumer affairs, utilities, all those kinds of common issues go into those committees. So when you're assigned to a committee, then you are charged with the duty to work with the legislators who are also assigned to that committee, Republican, Democrat alike, to understand and to be a little more of an expert in those issues, and to work with the other legislators to identify the problems, try to figure out why it's a problem. Can you make it better? Sometimes possibilities just create other problems. It's just, when you start playing around with it, you find out that whatever you try to do to fix something just creates some other problem, and you kind of wash your hands saying, no matter what at the moment, whatever we can think of doing just isn't working. We can't fix it. And sometimes you realize that some things can't be fixed anyway. But it's working with those other legislators, and half of them are across the aisle, Democrat, Republican, and they're also the relationships that you build over the years, too. There's so many issues that I didn't initially, as a legislator, have any desire to get into, that because I was assigned those committees, I've learned about. And I've learned so much about other parts of the state. And I've changed my opinion on so many issues. I had a preconceived notion about various issues when I came, because that was the communities I came from, my own experiences. And when I've met these other people, I've gone to their communities. We've gone to committee hearings and all around the state. We've done the research and development all around the state, interacting with those groups. I started to realize, well, I didn't know that about them. And I didn't know this, and I didn't know that. And then I started to realize that maybe my opinion of what I had when I came into office wasn't necessarily correct or the best. So worked with many members across the aisle, mostly on through the committee structure and I've been on so many committees that I've been on for years. So sometimes you get moved around from committee to committee. You don't develop quite the relationships. But a lot of committees I've been on for many years, and so have other members, and have long-lasting relationships with them, regardless of political affiliation.
Well, which committees were they?
Well, the more recent the long-serving times, I've been on Insurance Committee. The Insurance Committee deals with obvious insurance issues. And Consumer Affairs Committee, which I've been on a very long time, is utility issues and just generic issues regarding consumer issues through real estate, through the Attorney General's office, through anti-scamming and all those other kinds of things. And then also the commerce, which is generally banking and other related financial affairs, securities, and tourism, which is it's not a hard committee that does a lot of work, because tourism, really the best way to do tourism is to let tourism do itself, to encourage it. There's not so much laws related to it. But that particular one, I spent the most time traveling around the state and learning about the state, because in the tourism committee, part of this is to understand the tourism needs from all four corners. Tourism needs in Center City, Philly, in colonial Philadelphia, their needs are totally different than tourism in the Lake Erie region, or the Poconos, etc., or Gettysburg. So we would quite often travel to those places, interact with the local tourism groups and businesses to learn that. But over the years, I was on other committees too. I was subcommittee chair of First Class Cities, which was an inner city chairmanship, which to this day I learned more about public housing than I ever thought I'd ever learn. We went through projects and public housing units in Pittsburgh and Philly and places I never would want to go back in again. And I learned a lot about that, and I had no desire to learn about that originally. I was the utilities chairman for quite a while, which interacting with the telephones, the electric companies, the gas companies, etc. And I was my most recent is the vice chair of the insurance, which is technically my highest position I've been in, and working with all the various insurance needs and issues. And I've learned an awful lot about insurance. And my opinions have changed as I got into these positions. Some of my opinions of what I thought was right and wrong when I first got in didn't necessarily hold true, because when I learned more about it.
Well, I want to get back to that.
Okay.
How your issues have changed and your thoughts. But I want to talk about your legislation and your issues. And what do you feel were your most important pieces of legislation?
Well, I was looking back during this election cycle. I was looking back. I have 19 bills that ultimately became law. Now, some of them became law as their own bill. I'd introduced bills beginning of sessions to try to do something. And some of them became law as their bill. But others, due to negotiation, political reasons, maybe a senator would introduce a similar bill. And so I'd have to work, and maybe I let the senator get that bill become law, or I'd have to take my bill and turn it to an amendment and tack it onto another similar bill. So the one that did become law, another member actually was the sponsor, but it'd have multiple issues in it, and I'd be one of those issues. So those are the bills. Those are issues that ultimately became law that I had pursued. The insurance, probably my biggest is the insurance changes regarding to some diseases regarding the diabetes, mastectomies, gynecological visits, well baby visits. Those were probably some of my biggest bills that I ever got passed. Also, one that I don't talk about, but doesn't affect my community directly, is the Scofflaw Bill, which is the livestock bill for Philadelphia. I was working when one of my committees I was on. We had realized there was an issue of so many uninsured cars in Philadelphia, especially Philadelphia, but in other places, but mostly Philadelphia, and that was driving up the insurance rates for all Philadelphia residents. A resident who legitimately goes out, buys auto insurance. The insurance companies were paying out bills for all those people that are driving cars around with no insurance. You get into an accident, you have insurance, but the other guy doesn't. So your insurance company can't go to the other insurance company to get the money to fix your vehicle, because there is no other insurance company. So and as a suburban legislator, we do go into the city all the time, and people come out, so it affects our insurance rates too. So at one of the hearings, a series of hearings that we had, it was determined that, well, why can't we just get rid of these cars off the street? Well, the current laws that were at the time sort of prevented the police officers to pull a car over and to ask for insurance and person say, well, I don't have insurance. Well, the laws at the time prevented the police officer from just impounding the car. They could do nothing but write a ticket and hand them the ticket and say, goodbye, have a nice day, and they drove away. The reason why they didn't get insurance in the first place, they probably didn't have the money, so you know they're not going to go buy insurance tomorrow. So they're still driving around those vehicles. And that wasn't right. So we had passed, actually, a law affects the whole state, but it's mandatory that in Philadelphia, we gave them the authority. We gave them automatically authority that police officers can live stop vehicles. And if it's determined on the street that that car is not properly registered or inspected or insured or whatever, they can impound the vehicle on the spot. Philadelphia police have that authority today. And in fact, I was working with the mayor of Philly at the time, and they were requesting this. And Mayor Street had impounded, his second year in office, I guess it was, had impounded thousands of vehicles. You know, if you got on the backs of the police force, I want these vehicles off the street. Or even going down the street, find an abandoned vehicle. The police would just write a ticket and put it on its windshield, drive away. Well, that vehicle was never moved again. So this allowed them to tow it away. So that was one that didn't get much credit, but and I had a tremendous amount of, I had liquor code bills for various types of small changes, from club licenses to catering halls to wineries. And being in tourism, one of my small issues was a lot of the wineries our state is popping up with all these local wineries. These are small little wineries that are making their own wine and selling it. One of the issues was there was limitations to how much wine they could sell and how often they could sell out of their own little winery. And that was one of my bills to basically say, if you don't have the constraints at your little winery. If you produce it, you can go ahead and wine it. You don't have to get special permissions and all that as long as you're on your properties. And then allows them to go to special occasions to take the wine off the property, etc. There's a lot of other small things, but the insurance issues that are directly mine, some of the scofflaws, the anti-crime bills, the liquor code bills, etc.
Well, you had basically all the ones that I had.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the issues that are before the current legislature. What do you think is the hardest issue right now before the legislature?
What I feel were there's probably three main issues that I believe the next session is going to incur. Number one is the public. I think more the media is driving the public, but there is a desire for some sort of reforms of how government does business, whether it's the federal level or state levels. And so the legislature has to look among itself and decide if they're going to change some internal rules of how they do business or impact upon running for elections, how to fund elections, rules of how the governor runs, all those kinds of things. So reform is, the generic reform is a big issue that a lot of the freshmen coming in are going to want to see some sort of legislative changes. Property taxes and how we pay for our public schools. Well, we have made some changes in the prior session. They're small changes because the big changes are truly very difficult. There are winners and losers. Any change will cause some people to actually pay more money than less, while others receive less. And from their point of view, they don't want to pay more. Paying reform to funding our schools, people think everybody should pay less. Well, if everybody pays less, that means then, for instance, the school districts can only spend less money. But as long as they're spending the same amount of money, the money still has to be collected. That issue is not resolved. I think we did some things that improve it by putting caps on increasing spending. The gambling that we created will, over time, kick in some sort of money will help assist. It's not going to solve the problem. And requiring local communities to be involved in putting referendum on ballots to decide how they should maybe switch to some other types of taxes, what might be a little more fair. I think they're all good, positive steps, and I think it's going to help out, but it's still not the big nut that people really want to crack. And the last thing is this next budget year, there's going to be we have some costs that are in government that are rising very quickly, and they're mostly healthcare related costs to certain groups of people within the state. Elderly that are receiving the state prescription plans, or in-home health care plans, or et cetera. Then there's the poor, whether they're old or they're young. There's the desire to assist more individuals with some sort of health insurance needs, such as children, older, working people who just earn jobs that don't provide insurance. And the poor, what we call Medicaid, medical assistance, because the sheer cost of providing health care is rising so fast per unit. The number and the desire of people we want to serve, so the number of people are rising and the cost per unit is rising, we're starting to see an explosion of insurance, healthcare related expenses that the state is going to incur. And it's far faster than the rate of kind of new money coming into the state. And if not this year, at least by next year, we're going to see a crisis at the state level. They're going to have to make some tough decisions of not providing the health care that they want to provide, or talk about raising taxes. And that I believe will be that third component going into the budget cycle, that there's going to be some serious discussion of whether there's enough revenue being collected at the state level to pay for the things the state wants to do, and whether there's going to be either make cuts, which people don't like cuts, or raise taxes, and people don't like to raise taxes. So it would be a very difficult budget year.
So how have your issues changed through the years?
I'm a more compassionate person now than I was when I first came into office. I was a conservative, for sure, when I came into office. I'm a moderate now, conservative on fiscal issues, because I've now seen in the communities over the years that groups of people are not working, not because they choose not to work. It's because I didn't fully understand the dependency issues. I didn't fully understand the mental health problems that people have. I truly didn't understand the behavioral issues that people have, and also how the workplace has just changed to push some people out of the market, especially older citizens that are 55, 60, 65 years old. How I may have had more of an attitude, just go get a job, which most of them can just go get a job, but the jobs aren't enough to pay the bills or paying the health care expenses, et cetera, the benefits. And a more understanding of how things are not as easy in the world, or black or white, as they were when I thought they were. I was a young guy. I always had the motivation and drive, and I still do. If I needed more money, you went out and worked extra hours, you found another part-time job, you changed your job, you went back to school, you got a better career, et cetera, et cetera. You made it happen. And I still am a believer of that. But I'm also understand that not everybody can do that. And there's different reasons. There are many, many different reasons. And that I'm a little more compassionate than I was when I first got into office. I'm understanding of some of the needs of our society, and of course society is changing, and government has to change with it. And so I think, if anything, I think I'm a little more compassionate. I'm a little more willing to spend money if I think it's a worthy cause. I'm a little more willing to consider increasing taxes if it's for a good cause. I'm a little more willing to give schools more money if needed, if I think it's going to make a difference. And when I first got elected, I was very harsh. In suburban Philadelphia, we spent a heck of a lot of money on schools. Oh my God, we spent so much money on our public schools. And when I first came into office, that was wrong. They have to change, and they do have to change. And there's some changes have occurred, but now I'm kind of understanding of why they spend so much money, and some of the factors are out of their control. Some of the things that higher government puts upon them that they have to do. Special education. If you have a child, you want that child to grow up to be successful, to be able to survive in our society, to be able to be sufficient. And if you don't when I first came into office, I don't think I fully realized how a family who had a child that had special needs, who needed service at the local school district level or from whatever group there was, I don't think I fully understood how if you didn't provide that service, then 5, 10, 15 years from now, that child is going to be dependent upon government. And that we really need to do is, at early age, we need to spend the money and the resources to try the best we can to make that child succeed. So now that's a long-term investment. And I don't think I saw that when I first got elected. I don't think I saw the today. I said we need to control those expenses today. I'm a little more compassionate, understanding if we spend money in some areas now, it will yield in the future less government expenditures. So those are some of the things that have changed in my life, in my career.
How do you think you differ as a legislator from your father?
First of all, the job is dramatically different. The job was a legislator, as the legislative part of it, is probably very similar. The outreach into the community, my father was very good at that, but I've taken it to, because of my business background, my retail background, I've taken that to a new level and have made that a major part of the job of essentially a one-stop shop. People know who I am in the community. On election day, they knew who I am. They didn't know who a lot of the other people were. Whether they like me or not is a different story, but they knew who I was. I have thousands of people that go through my office. When I say go, I don't mean they necessarily walk through the door, but through telephone, email, etc., letters, go through my office every year. My father never had those things. I reach out and touch. I'm the first stop for people. When they have a problem or if they have a question, even if it's nothing to do with the state, people call me first. Because if it's not me directly, when I say I, it's collectively my staff and I. We will take their issue, even if it's with the federal government or even if it's the local government. We will take their issue and we'll say, we'll work on this. We'll get back to you when we get it resolved or get to the next step at least. Where the old way used to be, you were given a telephone number. We think this is your local municipality problem. Here's a telephone number to call the building. Thank you. And that was the service you got, which was good and adequate at the time. We have gone one step beyond that. It says, you know what, we understand your problem, we understand the issue. You don't have to call over to the township building. We will call on behalf of you. We'll call the local elected officials. We will whatever. We'll write the letters, we'll, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll work on it until we get a result, or we run into a wall or whatever, to whatever. And that frees you up of the worry because you don't know who to call, you know. And you know what? We can't go through 10 different places before we get an answer. Old way used to make you go make those telephone calls and get frustrated, and you just give up, and you just accept whatever fate you had. Today, we do it for you. We far get results. My father was very involved in the community, but I'm more involved in the community than he was. Partially because I think the job has become a full-time job. It was a full-time job for him too, but we have made it a full-time plus job, and I think we've just taken it. We've taken the community and constituent side to a new level that those older members had never seen before. A lot of the old members had other jobs.
What do you think were the memorable events that occurred during your tenure?
Well, the memorable ones are usually the more negative ones, and that goes with. And a lot of people always say, you know, running for elections, you know, why are the elections all negative? Well, the reason is because people remember negative before they remember positive. It's just a sad fact of life. People say that isn't true, but you know what? It is true. The researchers always say, you whisper down a line, a negative and a positive. At the end of the line, it's the negative that's always remembered. You know, that's a sad fact, but that's the way it is. Not in every case, but it's just a generality. And same thing with me. I can remember some stories of, I can remember during welfare reform years, my early career of my first or second term, we were going through the welfare reform. And I can remember the protesters coming to Harrisburg and marching and protesting and rallies and stuff like that. And I can remember when in the visitors gallery in the back of the house, up the second floor of the back of the house, the visitors used to throw stuff at us on the floor. And so they had to put a plexiglass wall up to keep people from throwing stuff at us. I can remember when ACT UP, which is an AIDS awareness group, which is probably still in existence, but you don't really hear much about it anymore. Back in the 90s, mid-90s, would come up on a regular basis to protest, to rally. And when the media stopped covering them on just a protest with a speech, they started to try to find, well, how can we get the media, how can we get the television to come back and cover us? So they started to up their, they started to escalate their antics. They used to dress in the Reaper outfits with sickles and all that. And then they got a coverage and then it disappeared. Then they started to chain themselves to the statues up here. That got covered, then it disappeared. Then I can remember they used to throw the red-dyed water balloons through the Capitol at people and whatnot, and that was a symbol of blood. And that got them a lot of attention. You know, then the media got lost attention with them. And I can remember when Governor Casey was sworn in for his second term, we were on the front steps of the Capitol here, out in the wintertime. We were all freezing. And they were out on the street, bullhorns, sound systems, blaring up, trying to drown out the speeches. They broke into a building across the street, locked themselves in. They were upstairs. The state police had to barge in and arrest them and drag everybody out just during the ceremonies. They had these catapulting the red water dye balloons onto all the guests in the audience, etc. And the only reason why we're doing all that is because they wanted to get media attention. I can remember during tough budget votes, being here for months without having a budget, having shut government down. Nobody got paid. You know, essentially when I say sweating out through the summer, you know, a long summer with employees not getting paid, vendors not getting paid, people getting very upset about it. I can remember fist fights on the House floor. By and large, the legislature is a very friendly group. We get along very well, very well. Occasionally, though, there is some scuffles. People have a different opinion on things. They think somebody stabbed them in the back, etc. But probably, let's think some more. Some of the positive ones is I enjoyed is when Matt Ryan, who was a majority leader at the time, and Bill DeWeese, who's the two leaders from both sides would be on the House floor. And I love this when they would get into political debates. Individual members would get up and speak about stuff, support a bill, oppose a bill, whatever. But when the two leaders got up quite often, even though they knew they weren't going to change maybe minds, and I love this, they got into a competitiveness against each other and who could give the best speech. And they did have little smirks and smiles, so they were sort of also making fun of it too, and in a good way. I mean, where they would try to beat the other one in the debate. And those debates, you know, there'd always be a lot, when other members would get up and speak, people weren't always paying attention. They were talking to their neighbors and stuff like that. But when those two leaders would get up to debate, the room got quiet. And it went back and forth, back and forth. A little bit of a bite, a little bit of a picking on each other. But you know what? They were civil, but priding a little bit, but civil. And even though they knew maybe their debates weren't going to change any votes, it was like they would escalate against each other. And Bill DeWeese has grammar that is people can't even understand. And Matt Ryan had an Irish background, and he wanted to win. He wanted to win. When he took a position, he wanted to win, and he wasn't going to let someone beat him on that. And those are probably some of the positive things. We had the centennial for the building. In my terms, we spent an awful lot of taxpayers' dollars renovating the building, and we did a great job. In fact, when they uncovered like a house, a 100-year-old building, like a house, it's been repainted many times. It's been recarpeted, refurbished. There's been leaks, so they put drop-leaf ceilings in, all that kind of stuff. Covered stuff up. When they brought the professionals in, you cannot believe what they found. You cannot believe how they restored. It's a beautiful building, and I'm very proud of what we have done. But I think the most memories I have are individual members. The legislature is not a building. It's people. And other legislators and other staff and key key people really are probably my fondest memories I've ever had.
What aspect of your job did you enjoy the most?
Working with people. I didn't prize what I did in Harrisburg so much as how I helped my community groups and individuals with their problems. We've helped thousands, tens of thousands of people over my career with everything from trying to find them a telephone number, which is something very simple, to people who have literally dug themselves into such a horrible hole. No, we didn't necessarily solve their problems, but we have improved them. You know, making somebody, the goal was to make them better off than they were when they came in the door. You can't always be successful in everything. Sometimes you just can't help people. Sometimes people got them in such a bad problems that you can't do anything to help them. But that's where I think my greatest pleasures have been, satisfaction of myself individually helping people, or my staff, and people saying thank you, which you don't get a lot of, and helping groups. My community groups have depended on me to assist them with bringing grants home, participating in the anniversaries, the ribbon cuttings, and the public community events, and the dinners and all those kinds of things, and help, you know, honoring local people, and et cetera, bringing home the Eagle Scout presentations for the boys who rose up. And I think those families and those people are, you know, never forget that. What
aspect did you not enjoy?
The one thing I don't enjoy the most is the wrangling, arm twisting for. I've had to take some votes that I would not have normally voted for in the past. Only because, as I mentioned earlier, if you come in and you're completely one-sided, it's my way or no way, you're not going to be around very long. Nobody will give you what you want unless you help the group as a whole. And if you're always the outsider throwing rocks, you're not helping the group as a whole. And many times you're on the same side. You like the group as a whole, and you legitimately try to help them. But there are times to get something important, you have to give up something. And sometimes you don't want to give that up, but you sort of feel you have to. And there are all kinds of different reasons for it. And what I don't like the most is sometimes having to swallow your pride. Sometimes kind of going back of what you maybe wanted to do and taking some hard votes maybe in the way that you really didn't want to, and having to go back home to explain them, and knowing darn well that the public generally doesn't understand that you had to give a little bit to get something else. And people who are only fixated on what one aspect cannot understand why you gave that away. They don't understand the other aspect.
Can you talk about the technology and the technological changes that you've witnessed since you've been here?
Well, let's go back a little further. When my father was in office, I was a kid at home. Telephone and written letters were the only communication, and in person, were the only communication there was. That was it. No fax machines when he was in office, no computers, essentially, no computers, and answering machines essentially not either. That was when I was a kid. Now as closer in into years here, there started to be some of that kind of stuff, but especially the older members didn't have computers. They didn't want to. People wouldn't understand. They weren't really accepting computers and things like that. When I came in, of course, I'm a young person, and I'm more familiar with the modern tools that we have. And so, right off the bat, we got fax machines, we got computers, we got emails, we got voicemails, we got call forwarding, we got all kinds of things, cell phones, so, we got a mobile office. I don't have to be at my desk anymore to do work. It is dramatic how it's also created a problem. The public used to have to wait for answers, unless it was on the phone and you talk with them. They'd have to wait sometimes, when the secretaries would do a letter on carbon paper, type it out, and then, mail it in the mail. It took forever. It took a week to get an answer. Today, in many cases, we can get answers to them immediately. We can get them at 3 o'clock in the morning. We can get them. We can get people who ask me questions at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I'm never on the computer at 3 o'clock in the morning, but in the morning I'll find that, and I can respond right back to them. And I can get them at work, I get them at their home, they get them their cell phone, I can get them whatever. They got my cell phone number, and the good and the bad of that is people are now used to getting instant information. And if they don't get it instantaneously, they get upset. At one time, if they got it in a week, they were happy. Today, if they don't get it immediately, they're not happy. So it is a monster, too. It sort of created a problem. But on the other hand, I think it's allowed legislators to do a lot more, to achieve a lot more, to do a lot more for people, to reach out a lot more than ever before, to communicate with people than we ever did before. And it'll continuously to evolve in the future.
Would you like to comment on your relationship with the media?
It's a love-hate relationship. Generally, it's not a good relationship. Let me explain why. I'll go off on a couple different reasons here. I'll give you an example, first of all. The media complains how elected officials and challengers are so negative in their talks and their mailers and their issues, etc. But just go to the paper every day. Just look at that paper. I provide every day positive stuff to the media. Got a grant for a group, a bill we passed, something is a little better. It's a positive message. And it rarely gets printed. They don't cover it. They don't care. Remember I talked about the whispering, the positive and negative message, which one lasts? But yet anything even remotely negative, front page news, or gets a prominent article or whatever. And so they talk out of both sides of their mouth. They say, you know, candidates should talk about positive issues. But even as candidates, you give them positive issues and they don't write about them. But as soon as you even rumor something, they want to write an article. And the reporters are that way. But I have to admit, they're only responding to what the people that are buying the papers want to read. The people that are buying the papers or watching the news, etc., people say they want positive news, but whenever the local papers or whatnot write positive articles, we have these little weeklies in the community, etc., that do positive things, no one subscribes to them. They don't get viewers. They don't get, but yet the people get the dailies that have all the negative stuff in it: the war, the death, the fires, the arsons, the rapes, the murders. You know, that's what is in the papers. And so the writers, editorialists, are really just mimicking what the public seems, not what's coming out of their mouth, but it seems to be purchasing with their dollars. They're just providing what the viewers, even though they say they don't want that, are actually in action, are purchasing that product. And so the writers and the editors are essentially then writing and doing those issues, those stories regarding what they perceive the public would rather read about. And scandal. People love scandals. They don't like to talk about scandals, so, you know, but they love them. They always love who's doing what to who. They love those kind of stories. And that's what, and the reporters are just reporting it. And I've done so many opportunities giving the media positive stuff. They just don't print it. And you know, you talk to them 100 times and you get nothing out of them. And then there's some kind of a negative issue. And so you try to talk about the two sides of the issue. Well, but you know, it's not that bad, this, but they don't print that other side of it. And they only print the negative. So then, of course, elected officials are shy to say that, well, you're never going to print you're not going to say anything good about it anyway, so why should I give you anything? You're just going to be negative.
Do you have any regrets?
Well, yes and no. The only immediate regret I have was the pay raise vote that we took last year was probably, I've taken some votes in the past. I voted for pay raises in the past, and it didn't generate to be this. You know, public gets pay raises, and you know, but elected officials don't seem to be allowed to, because the public are essentially through taxes are paying our salary, and they don't want people using their money, even public officials or even staff, to get raises out of their money. But if any of the votes, the worst votes, that would probably be the worst one. At the time, it didn't seem to be any different than some of the other tough votes I took in the past. Knowing darn well it was going to be a tough vote. I knew it darn well. But it generated a life of its own. And that goes back to the question about the media, I think, because the media made it an issue. And the media is also losing control over the public, because the public has so many other places that they get information from, that the media is trying to stake out a turf to say that you know, we will drive policy in America and therefore take positions on things and then do the reporting to reinforce what their positions are. And it was very clear this year that they wanted some sort of changes and reforms, and they were using the pay raise as one of the issues of why they need change and reform, and they just drove that hard. I did vote for it, and they were successful. But that didn't beat me, but there were other factors. But I think that was probably the most regrettable vote.
We've talked about your legislation and your issues. What would you say were your greatest accomplishments?
Well, we talked about legislative issues, and I talked about some of the proposals, but and we sort of really dealt with this question. Some of the pieces that I voted for and I discussed, obviously, were my legislative pride, but a lion's share of the job is what I said, is back in the community and helping people one-on-one. I've helped so many people get out of tough problems that that very few people know about. And of course, you don't want the public to know if someone had a problem. And I've had people who have had bad issues that are outstanding people in the community, and nobody else knew how bad they were. In terms of losing they lost their job and paying their bills and being kicked out of the house, etc. I can remember just one example. It was Mother's Day morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. This is probably eight years ago. 5 o'clock in the morning, phone rings, local police force calls me. They just picked up a woman on the street who was living with a man in this place. They were not married. The part of the apartment was actually under his name, so it's his place. She was living with him. They had a child together. It was a young baby, an infant of sorts. Father and mother, but they weren't married. And he did not have custody of the child either. But they got drunk. He became abusive, but not overly abusive, not assault abusive, but there was a little bit of it. So she fled, and all she had was her coat, and that was about it. And ended up at the police station at that particular point, and the police were they were trying to decide whether to file charges or not. It was like the borderline kind of an issue, and I'm not involved with that part of that issue. But why they called me is now they have a woman who has no money at all, no place to go. She did not live in this area. She's from another part of the country. No relatives, no friends, no nothing. 5 o'clock on a Mother's Day morning, what do they do with her? So they called me, get my little black book out, calling the DA's office, calling the various directors of the social service groups, etc. And I was able to find her a place, a homeless shelter, to get her into. It was a woman's place, which is a shelter / typically a women's abuse center. Got her fixed up with some clothes, got her fixed up with a legal rights person to advise her about her rights and whatnot. Also had the welfare department to go out and check on the child. You know, they said the child was perfectly fine, and he was the father, so there's no immediate risk. There's no evidence of the father doing anything, and it seemed to be perfectly fine. He was a responsible person for the child, and he was the father, so you know there's those difficult issues there. So that's just an example of some of the things that we do. And we had talked about some of the grants I brought home for the various communities and local governments that I'm very proud of.
What are your future plans?
As I sit here, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Thank God I'm young enough, and this is a real problem. Some of the legislators that are leaving that are upper 50s and 60s are not really old enough to retire. But yet, in this society, it's difficult to get a good job at that age. They're going to have a little more trouble. I'm at the age where I can start another career. My goals would be to get into some sort of a management positions with businesses. I have, through my committees, not when I first started, but through my committee structure, I'm very knowledgeable and experienced in working with insurance fields and financial fields. Mm-hmm. It's probably where I'm going to be going into.
Do you plan to stay active in politics?
I don't know about that. For the near future, yes. I don't know, though, if I as a person am going to run for another position, or just to be a loyal supporter for the cause. But I will probably be a loyal supporter for the cause. I don't know if I'll ever run for any other positions.
I think you answered this question, but what advice would you have for new members?
To be civil. I have seen the tone of elections to get nasty. These election cycles, to get very nasty in the last couple terms. And that quite often sets the tone for whoever wins when they come into office. And I said earlier that by and large, this is a very civil group. We get along very well. I don't want to see the bickering. I don't want to see the backstabbing. I don't want to see the and unfortunately, this session coming up, we have an awful lot of members that will see only black and white on issues. It's their issue or else. It's their opinion this way or else. Nothing else. They will not bend. I have this crop of freshmen, both parties, seems to be a very, very inflexible group of people. Other people in the past have come in and said, you know, I'm open-minded on issues. This class of legislators coming in, by and large, I think is probably the largest group that has ever been, in my mind, inflexible, and that things are going to change. They're going to change my way and in nobody else's way. And they're going to run into a wall. They're going to run into the existing structure who's going to say, earn your keep first before you tell us what to do. And I don't see some of these people being able to survive that and essentially having so much stress that they desire to not run again, or essentially be beating their head into a wall over and over and over again, or unfortunately pushing the structure that's already in existence to essentially go after them, which I don't want to see either. So if anything for the freshmen, it's three different things. Be civil, remember your community, and also remember your family and spouse.
How would you like to be remembered?
As a caring person who helped thousands of people in my community and helped a tremendous amount of community groups to make the community better.
Thank you, Representative Wright. This was a wonderful interview. I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today.
Thank you.